I'm Brooke Foster, and I learned the hard way that some wounds don't bleed, they echo. 2 years ago, a man I pulled back from the edge of death thanked a stranger for saving him, while looking straight at me and never knowing it was my voice in his ear. I stood there, invisible in plain sight, listening to him praise a ghost and mock the kind of woman he thought I was. That night, something inside me cracked, not loud, but final. And I promised myself, if the truth ever surfaces, it won't be because I asked to be seen. It'll be because they finally opened their eyes. I hadn't stood on Trailhead Ridge in years, yet the place felt frozen exactly as I'd left it, quiet, familiar, and never truly mine. People gathered in small circles, palms wrapped around paper cups of steaming coffee, scarves pulled tight against the mountain air. The memorial for my uncle sat beneath a bronze bust, candles flickering in the dim morning light. Families murmured softly, trading memories with the same measured politeness this town had always carried. I moved through the crowd like someone passing by, their own reflection recognizable, but not enough for anyone to really stop and look. The nods I received were the same nods I'd grown up with, the ones that said "good to see you," but not long enough to ask anything real. It was always like this, a place that knew my face, not my depth. I spotted Laurel first. She waved me over, excitement brightening her entire expression as she leaned into the man beside her, Evan Mercer. His presence stirred the kind of reaction the town adored. People straightened when they saw him, as if standing in good posture somehow brought them closer to his orbit. Laurel slipped her hand through his arm before gesturing lazily toward me. "This is my cousin Brooke," she said, like checking a box. "She works something at the tech center." Evan offered a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Support staff, right. The folks we call when we need information but don't want to dig for it." A few people chuckled. Someone elbowed me lightly, as if it were all in good fun. I smiled back, the same practiced curve of the lips I'd worn my whole life in this town. No one here ever paused long enough to wonder what I actually did or why I'd shown up without a single word of explanation. They simply saw the version of me they had built years ago and decided it was still accurate. What they couldn't see, not yet, was how dangerously wrong they were. I stood there, letting the small talk float past me, feeling the familiar sting settle beneath my ribs. Rocky Pines had a way of reminding me exactly where I stood in everyone's hierarchy. And today, apparently, Evan Mercer was happy to help reinforce it. I said nothing, but inside, the ground had already shifted. Laurel's backyard shimmered under rows of warm string lights, the kind that made winter evenings feel softer than they really were. Country music drifted from a small speaker near the deck, blending with the crackle of the grill and the occasional cheer from the adults passing cold beers around. Kids chased each other across patches of thin snow, their boots smacking against the frozen ground. It was the kind of scene people in towns like Rocky Pines treasured: simple, familiar, never complicated. I stayed close to the fire pit, letting its heat soak into my palms. I kept expecting the night to settle quietly, but it shifted the moment Evan climbed onto the deck and lifted his bottle to get everyone's attention. Conversations lowered. People turned. He didn't even have to ask. The crowd gravitated toward him like iron filings to a magnet. He dove right into retelling the blizzard rescue from 2 years earlier, the same one etched into my memory with painful clarity. But listening to him now felt like hearing someone describing a dream that wasn't theirs. He talked about how he'd relied on instinct, how he'd charted a route through zero visibility, how he'd kept the team together through sheer will. And then he brushed off the voice on the radio as some girl reading GPS notes from a warm office chair. Laughter erupted. Laurel clinked her glass against his with a grin full of admiration. As if bravery echoed louder when told in the right cadence, I pressed my hands together to steady myself. I remembered that night with a precision he clearly didn't, his voice shaking through the static, the faint thermal signatures blinking in and out on the monitor, the way I counted each breath to keep him conscious. Watching him now, I felt the same mix of fear and frustration coil in my stomach, the knowledge that the truth had been swallowed by a prettier version of events. The first twist of the night hit when Evan, without meaning to, mocked the very person who had kept him alive. And he didn't even realize she was standing 10 feet away. Then Laurel cheerfully chimed in, congratulating him for single-handedly saving his team. If Evan hadn't been there, she laughed, they would have been done for. The group nodded as if the universe had clearly favored him. Her comment washed over the crowd, wiping out the only part of the story that mattered. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a jolt sharp enough to snap my attention from their applause. A new alert flashed across the screen, 3 researchers missing on maroon bells. The night suddenly tasted metallic. I planned to slip out as soon as I could. The mission alert had already triggered the part of my mind that never fully shuts off. But before I could leave, Laurel looped her arm around mine, insisting I come early to help set up for her rehearsal dinner the next day. A few relatives chimed in with suggestions like arranging chairs or managing playlists, each task handed out as if I were part of the event staff, inside. A familiar weight settled beneath my ribs. I knew what was expected of me: here, be helpful, be pleasant, be available. But the alert on my phone pulsed with a different kind of urgency entirely. I opened the RMSR internal app and watched the real-time data load. A 17-degree wind shift, snowpack fractures forming the dangerous antler pattern at 9,000 feet. A brief SOS ping that appeared and vanished like a dying heartbeat. My pulse tightened. I'd seen this combination before. It was the same signature that had preceded the blizzard disaster 2 years earlier. The same one Evan barely remembered surviving. The central dispatch board updated again, and the breath left my chest. Unit 4 deployed. Evan's team. A knot formed low in my stomach, cold and unmistakable. They were heading toward a section of terrain that would turn deadly without warning, and they didn't even know it. I grabbed my keys from the side table by the sliding door and walked toward the gate. The cold hit me instantly, sharp and bracing. Behind me, laughter rose again from the deck, bright, careless, oblivious. No one asked where I was going. No one stopped me. They had no idea they were watching the only person who could save Evan's team walk into the night again. Maple Summit Lodge glowed like a postcard, golden lights reflecting off polished wood. Soft chatter rolling across the room as relatives drifted between the bar and long banquet tables. I stepped inside, trying to steady the unease crawling up my spine. Something in the air outside had been wrong all afternoon. Like the weather was whispering a warning only I could hear. But the moment my feet crossed the threshold, the family swallowed me whole. Someone pressed a glass of wine into my hand. Someone else tugged me toward a circle of guests. They told me to relax, enjoy myself, let the night be easy. I nodded along, even as my mind kept drifting back to the earlier alert, blinking on my phone. The storm pattern was shifting too quickly, too sharply, but I knew better than to bring it up here. In this room, the world was supposed to be warm and uncomplicated. Evan stood near the stone fireplace like it was the stage he'd been born to stand on. People gravitated toward him instantly, crowding close as he described rescues through snowfields and helicopter drops in whiteouts, his hands emphasizing every detail. He had the room in his palm. Then he said my name. Brooke here's different. She handles the support work, the kind that never sees blood. Laughter swept through the room. Someone clapped me on the shoulder as if offering comfort, insisting everyone has a place. I held the same polite smile I'd worn my whole life, even as a familiar sting settled beneath my ribs. Behind the laughter, I heard another sound, sharp taps against the lodge windows, ice pellets hitting glass, a rhythm that didn't belong in weather the forecast claimed would stay mild. I glanced at the mounted lodge TV. The radar loop was at least 15 minutes behind, a dangerous lag. My pulse tightened. Evan kept promising he'd be home early from tonight's field check. Just a quick sweep, nothing serious, he said. Laurel kissed his cheek, laughing in that careless way people do when they assume the world will always bend in their favor. I checked my phone under the table. Snowpack depth had jumped from 23 to 28 centimeters in half an hour. That kind of loading didn't just happen. It built under stress, waiting to release all at once the same signature I'd studied the night Evan barely survived. I swallowed the urge to speak. I already knew the outcome. They'd laugh again, maybe louder, and nothing I said would change the weather creeping up that mountain. Then my phone buzzed violently against my palm, SOS ping detected elevation 9,100 feet. The exact zone I'd been fearing. I set the wind down, stood, and walked toward the door. No one noticed. No one asked. The laughter behind me rolled on uninterrupted as I stepped into the cold, the night swallowing me whole. The drive up the pass felt like tunneling through a storm made of needles. Snow blasted across the windshield so hard it rattled the glass, and each curve of the road grew slicker, darker, more unforgiving. I kept going. I didn't have the luxury of turning back. When I reached the RMSAR headquarters, the parking lot was a blank stretch of white. Inside, motion sensor lights flickered awake as I walked down the silent hallway, illuminating the metal doors one by one. The stillness thickened around me, the same stillness I'd felt 2 years earlier, right before everything went wrong. I pushed into the control room. Screens glowed with fractured telemetry, red warnings pulsing like a heartbeat gone arrhythmic. Unit 4 signal integrity 40%. A sick drop hit my stomach. Their path had drifted 17 meters off course, far enough to funnel them straight onto the unstable slab forming beneath the storm. I grabbed the headset, calling out on the primary frequency. Rescue Unit 4, RMSAR dispatch. Do you copy? Static crackled back at me, hollow and relentless. I tried again. Nothing. A third time. Still nothing. I flipped open the protective cover on Console 3. Beneath it waited the switch I hadn't touched since the night Evan nearly died. Emergency override Skyline. The line reserved for critical operations the voice teams heard only when everything else had failed. My breath fogged the dark screen, hanging in the air like a countdown. Everyone was gone. The storm was building. Unit 4 was blind. And I was the only person left who knew how to guide them out. I pressed the switch. The red indicator lit the room in a sharp, urgent glow. Skyline 9 was live again. The control room felt like a hollowed-out bunker, lit only by the cold glow of blue LEDs. Outside, the storm ripped across the antenna with a sharp metallic shriek, as if the wind itself was trying to warn me what waited on that mountain. I rested my hand on the override mic, feeling a pulse of old muscle memory surge up my spine. I hadn't used that voice in years, the one I saved for moments when seconds decided who lived and who didn't. I inhaled once, steady and slow, then pressed the switch. Rescue Unit 4. This is Skyline 9. Freeze your position immediately. 2 seconds of dead silence answered me, 2 seconds that told me exactly how close they were to disaster. When Evan finally spoke, his voice wavered in disbelief, cracking through the static. Skyline 9. No! It can't be! I didn't entertain the shock. The data streaming across my screens was already turning dire. The slab beneath them had shifted 14 millimeters. A fresh fracture spread in the antler pattern nature's warning sign. Wind screamed from the west at 22 miles per hour. They were standing on a breathing slab, the kind that collapsed without mercy. Shift 31 degrees right. Recheck harness tension. Do not move beyond that. A scream pierced the channel. Rope dragged. Evan yelled that Graham had dropped. I saw the thermal signature fall 12 feet on the radar. Anchor point. Halyard lift. Move! Wind battered their mics, turning their breaths into shards of noise. Then another failure hit the locator. Beacon flickered and died. Skyline 9. Our tracker's out. We've lost all visual. My pulse tightened. Without the beacon, radar estimates were nearly blind. I switched to triangulation, tracing faint distortions only operators with years of practice could decipher. I've got you. Keep radio contact open. Another wind shift hit 6 degrees in 40 seconds. Unheard of. A shift like that meant the entire slab was on the verge of rotating. Tighten lines. Dig in your crampons. Hold. Then Evan whispered, breath shaking as realization broke through. God, it is you. I know that voice. You saved me before. I kept my voice level. We have 9 minutes. Follow every instruction. 6 monitors glowed before me, 4 scrambled. 1 flickering, 1 pulsing red like a dying heartbeat. I leaned in, extracting meaning from chaos. The primary crack widened at a terrifying pace, 14 millimeters, 18 millimeters, 20 millimeters, all in under 3 minutes. Move before 9 minutes or the whole face takes you down. We're hauling Graham up, Evan shouted. Rope scraped. Ice groaned. Every instinct in me mapped their positions through sound alone. Then another panic-laced shout. Gloves are iced over. I'm losing grip. Secondary anchor. Use the aux carabiniere now. I calculated fall trajectories in my mind. Time shrinking faster than the slab beneath them. Then the storm struck with a microburst, an invisible hammer. Press flat to the wall. Stay low. They obeyed instantly. Wind screamed through their mics. Then their final headlamp tumbled into a crevasse. Total darkness. We can't see a thing, not an inch. Using raw triangulation, I traced their safest exit. Head northeast, 20 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. They ran. 8 seconds later, the mountain detonated behind them, a deep, rolling collapse that shook the room. Evan's breath returned, ragged but alive. Skyline 9. You saved us. Again. And now I know who you are. Keep moving. I told him. You're not safe yet, but inside. Something finally loosened just enough to know they were still here. Every alert in the RMSAR control room burned red, casting the walls in a warning glow. Outside, snow slammed against the windows in thick sheets, turning the world into a shivering blur. My voice was the only thread keeping Evan's team tethered to life. Their breaths collided through the radio heavy, frantic, boots scraping ice. Evan's voice cracked as he counted steps. Skyline 9? We're losing someone. I leaned over the radar, pulse hammering, but mind razor sharp. Keep 3 feet apart. Do not drift right. There's a blind drop. Graham's responses thinned, slipping toward unconsciousness. I sharpened my tone. Graham, stay with me. What color is your pack? Tell me. The silence that followed slammed straight into my chest. Then the mountain answered for him, one long, violent crack that tore across the channel. I stood so fast my chair skidded. Hands on the rope pressed flat. The radar flared into full red collapse imminent. They had seconds, not minutes. Northeast, 20 seconds. Run. Don't look back. Their footsteps erupted into motion. 8 seconds later, the slab behind them exploded. The low, brutal roar shook the monitors. For a heartbeat, I feared the line had gone dead with them. Then Evan's breath returned ragged, alive. Skyline 9. You saved us. I closed my eyes, steadying my voice. Keep moving. I'm here. By the next evening, the team had made it safely down the mountain, but the relief in town felt thin, stretched over something heavier. The lodge had been transformed for the engagement dinner, string lights glowing, centerpieces set perfectly, champagne chilling in silver buckets. Yet the atmosphere was oddly muted. A draft pushed through the window seams, a cold whisper threading through the room, and every guest seemed a little too aware of it. I slipped inside without drawing a single glance. I stayed near the edge of the room, half shadowed by a decorative pillar, watching people move around me as if I were invisible. They still saw me as the quiet cousin who handled background tasks, someone who'd always just blend into the edges. Laurel spoke with a small group near the bar, her smile tighter than usual, her eyes flicking toward Evan every few seconds. Then Evan stood. He set his glass down harder than he meant to, and the table shuddered under the impact. Conversations cut out instantly. Even the musicians paused, bow hovering midair over the strings. Evan's gaze locked on me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he seemed stripped of all that easy confidence the town adored. There is someone here who saved my life last night, and the lives of every man on my team. And we laughed at her. A ripple of confusion moved across the tables. Forks stopped midair. Someone's breath caught audibly. Then he said my name. The woman who guided us through the storm, the same voice that saved us 2 years ago, was Brooke. It hit the room like a sudden drop in temperature. Laurel's mouth fell open, color draining from her cheeks. One of my uncles fumbled his napkin to the floor. Across the room, the admiration people once showered Evan with seemed to recoil inward, folding into embarrassment. Evan kept going, voice thick but steady. I called her support staff. I called her someone who never sees the field. But she is Skyline 9, the reason my team is alive. Laurel's hand slipped off Evan's arm. fingers curling back toward herself as the truth settled in. It was the faintest movement, but it carried the weight of her entire world realigning. I didn't step forward. I didn't smile. I didn't offer reassurance or acceptance. I simply stood there, letting the silence speak for me. The truth didn't need my voice. It had already detonated. In that moment, I watched every assumption this family and this town had ever made about me crumble like the mountain ice that almost took Evan's life. And all I had to do was stand still. The lodge glowed behind me as I stepped into the cold, its warmth fading the moment the door shut. Snow drifted across the path in soft sheets, settling on my shoulders like a quiet reminder of where I truly belonged. Each step through the powder made a crisp, certain sound far more honest than any late apology waiting inside. I didn't stay to watch their faces shift or hear them rewrite what they thought they knew about me. I didn't need validation or praise. What mattered was the world that existed beyond those golden lights, the one where my voice meant survival, not spectacle. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. A new notification from HQ, 72 hours of emergency coverage needed. I exhaled, almost relieved, and opened the car door. In the mirror, the lodge shrank into a blur of yellow. Ahead, the mountains waited. My voice doesn't need recognition, only purpose. I drove into the falling snow, letting it cover what I was finally ready to leave behind.